I think one of the most exciting things that I'm looking forward is seeing young creative minds tell stories in compelling, exciting new ways,
Right.
regardless of their means and their social class or their access to equipment, money, etc. So I think that's a huge and wonderful tool in that respect. I mean, obviously, the downside of that, which John sort of began to open the question about, is the downside, I suppose, is creating fear when it's used inappropriately and
Right.
when can be used to exploit, spread misinformation and pretend to be something that it really shouldn't, or entice viewers into worlds perhaps that they shouldn't be going into. And so, with any technology, it's about the responsibility of the user and the creator.
I think a lot of the conversation on AI and creativity is going to places of a bit of darkness and sort of disruption, and what does it mean for the human element? And those are important conversations that are happening across the industry and in the world. We're, I believe, being quite responsible in how we hope our tools and technologies are showing up. But there's another dimension to it, which is our capabilities. AI is one of them. Immersive technologies are another. It's enabling you to go deeper into your engagement with a story, and I think that as a platform operator, we get to see a lot of signals of what consumers respond to or they desire. Things like microdramas, it's not lost on us that that's been a trend that consumers have appreciated. So I think we three of us, I would say, probably all agree that there is an element of storytelling that's going to add dimension to character engagement. And sometimes that might happen on a big screen. It might happen in an immersive environment. It might happen on intelligent eyewear with very small screens. But creative geniuses are going to find ways to tell incredibly compelling stories with new technologies that both a consumer can interact with, that allows you to maybe have a deeper appreciation of the story arc itself.
We're at a stage with this technology that the chasm between ideation and visualization is collapsing. The moment where you have the distance between a world in your head and being able to have someone experience that world is drastically getting shorter, and that's really exciting. I also think there's new platforms, new ways to tell stories that this technology is enabling, new stories that are being told that couldn't be told with this technology, and I think that's also very exciting.
From your perspective, what's the line that sort of blurs between a tool, that captures and extends a human performance and a machine that, if you like, manufactures one?
Well, to start with, I think saying that Gollum was built by a computer is questionable. Here we have a character that was written by J.R.R. Tolkien. J.R.R. Tolkien. It was designed by brilliant concept artists who came up with millions of different iterations of what the character would look like. It was then played by an actor on set who gave it a voice and a soul and a life and a physicality, a way of moving. It was directed, of course, by a brilliant director. It was manifested on screen by legions of CG artists and animators and compositors. So it wasn't essentially built by a computer. And that is really what performance capture has been sort of slightly misinterpreted as. It's somehow not crafted by an actor. It is the ultimate tool of the 21st century, as far as I'm concerned. You can become anything or anyone, and you can, as long as you have the acting chops to do that, you can live within that character.
With Andy's brilliance in bringing characters to life with technology has been just absolutely electrifying to get to partner with Google and think strategically about how we can bring a character to life, and ethically, responsibly, and really in a way that is preserving the human spirit. The other way that we're using it, because it's a real-time project, meaning it's something that is as an immersive experience. It's not a flat experience, right? So all of our animation it's certified, organic, artisanally handcrafted, organic, artist-created animation. But we are using a lot of these tools for rapid prototyping and visualization so that we can be very clear about the decisions that we're making. So when we're working with artists, we can better respect their time by saying, hey, look, this is, let's move, maybe you want to move the camera this way, maybe you want to move it that way. From a directorial standpoint, we can be much more clear and spend a lot more time using these tools to empower our artists to be able to do what they do best.
So we've set up an initiative we refer to as 100 Zeros, which is really our desire to kind of understand what the professional creative community is asking for from new technological-based tools and capabilities, and then try to respond in kind. And I think that's what's been great about this project is we're hearing from Josh and from Andy of like, well, here's what I'd like to represent on screen, and if you could build me a tool that does this, I think I could deliver a really compelling emotional experience for the consumer. I don't think that we as a platform have an opinion on what that format has to be. It could be a long form movie, it could be a microdrama, it could be an interactive experience. But I think what we would like to do is be able to support the creative community in helping them push the boundaries to places that it hasn't gone before. And I think we're starting to be quite successful in that.
Theoretically, when anyone can sort of summon a world or a whole world in seconds, what is the human skill that decides whether an immersive story is any good and can work? For
film and TV, you have your screen, and that invites audiences to witness a story. When you dissolve that boundary, you're now inviting audiences to inhabit a story, right? You're blurring that boundary between what's in this story and where these characters are and the viewer's space. And so there's a much more visceral connection and involvement with the story. To me, I think it ultimately comes down to an embodied judgment, right? I mean, this is the first time that we've had tools that can make decisions.
Right.
And I think that's quite profound, right? You can give a prompt and say, hey, I want X, Y, Z, but the product of any scene is a result of so many different decisions. The decisions of what a character should wear, what the blocking should be, how the camera should move. And to me, I think the way that we make our decisions as humans is informed by so much of our visceral human experiences living inside of bodies, and those decisions that we make of why a camera should move and how that changes our relationship. Right? We have an understanding of what we want a user or a viewer to experience emotionally. And then our task is to be able to make decisions around that to help facilitate that experience. To me, I think the risk is if you defer a lot of those decisions to a machine or to,
you lose that curation, you lose that capability, yeah. Audiences also are looking to ask, whether are they watching something made by a person, are they watching something made by a machine, whether they should be told to them, should be marked to them. Does that distinction matter to the person watching? And do we owe them an answer? It's
a big one. I think that in most aspects of our life, we like to know what we're consuming, whether that be nutrition or entertainment consumption, and we'd like to know the source of origin. So personally, I'm certainly in that camp that I'd like to know the source of origin. I think we're getting into some elements where there's a blurry line between where creativity starts and stops. That's not really been a problem that the world's had to grapple until quite recently. I think YouTube in many ways democratized distribution, and we've seen now an amazing supply of content and storytelling coming from parts of the world, being able to reach other parts of the world that simply wasn't possible. We're now entering an era where democratizing creativity is maybe becoming possible. And I think there'll need to be really thoughtful, important conversations, probably on a regional basis of what is appropriate for norms in a culture, in a given country. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to the question.
I really, it falls into two camps for me. I mean, I, on the whole, like to know what is true and what is false. And so, yes, I would agree that, if we are owed an answer, and that answer, if it's fact, if we're telling factual stories, if we're using AI to pass on information, we need to know that is true. And so I would like to know if I'm getting my information from a reliable source, and whether that is a human source or whether it's a machine learned source, I think is deeply important. I genuinely think that it's an extraordinary juncture we're at in terms of the possibilities of storytelling. And as long as it's a compelling story, and having said that, as long as the artists or people who are the creators are not exploited, then I don't, and elements of the story are told using AI. I don't need to know where and how and who, just as if the storytelling's good. I mean, and I think that's quite interesting, that to be open to the fact that we can be told stories by AI and enjoy them. And so I think as long as there is no exploitation, I think, and that people are respected for the work that they do and that they're remunerated properly for the work that they do. In terms of fiction, yeah, I think it's up for grabs.
I hope that these tools enable the kids with the story and the world in their heads that don't have access to the studio to be able to tell their stories. I hope that these tools can help remove so much of the drudgery of the process, but not rob artists of the delight that comes from dedication and devotion to their craft and to telling stories.
I think for a long time we've thought about storytelling as being almost a linear experience, and mostly in the realm of film and TV, mostly a 16:9 experience. I think the world is changing quite rapidly, that interesting stories will live in an environment that is not always linear in the way we experience it. So it may be that it's something in between a world building type experience that's a little bit game, a little bit linear, a little bit always on, and a little bit interactive for the consumer. I think we're excited to see those worlds evolve.
I mean, freedom to imagine anything, any world, any story. Even if you have that, the source of a great story, but you're not a great hands-on creator, to be able to bring that to life as a young kid who might not be able to draw or play a musical instrument, but has a song in his or her head, or to be able to somehow bring that to life, I think is an incredible opportunity that and will open up the imagination, and therefore once the imagination's opened up, people become more empathetic, and that is a wonderful thing. But I think one of the things that I hope AI hasn't taken is the budget to create and tell stories more conventionally, because that is also equally important. And if it's going to be about reducing budgets so that you can't tell stories, that you have to do it in a particular way because it's cheaper, and that will become a chain around our necks, and we don't want that.